There are certain members of our craft who are the unsung heroes. I put in this category every secretary of every lodge and chapter, every treasurer of every lodge and chapter, and I also add to that category brothers who are historians of their lodges in their districts. And sadly, too many lodges do not have historians, brothers who have taken the time to care about their history and to preserve their artifacts. I am so honored that two wonderful brothers, Worshipful Brother Ron DSA and Brother Nathan, who have taken the extra time and burden on to work with Craftsmen Online and to write so many wonderful history articles and to present this evening. But first, let me introduce Brother Alex. Brother Alex has been the director of the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library in Grand Lodge, the state of New York, since September of 2019. He has a master's degree from Pratt Institute in Library and Information Science with a certificate in archives and a bachelor's degree in medieval and Renaissance studies from Vassar College. He's a fellow craft mason and a member of Yorktown Diamond Thistle Lodge number 555 in Tarrytown, New York. And I'm pleased to introduce Brother Alex at this time. Brother Alex, the floor is yours.
I'm Alexander Vastola. I'm the director of the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library in New York City. I'll be going over a couple of basic slides with some information about starting first with basic document and archives records preservation standards. I can't go into super detail tonight due to the length presentation. Generally, it is recommended in storage environment that a stable temperature of no higher than 70 degrees Fahrenheit, relative humidity with only a maximum of 50% for storing records and collections. The reason is because humidity can cause damage to collections, especially if they're paper-based, such as files, archival files, and photographs. As far as storage containers, because there is lignin, groundwood, and alum rosin sizing, or sometimes components in paper, this can lead to the formation of acid if exposed to excessive heat. So it's important that any archives and paper-based collections, photographs, are stored in acid-free containers. A buffered stock that's lignin-free, purified board as protective enclosures. A very useful method is as far as storing these items is to get them from a trusted archival supply company. Gaylord Archival is the one that the Chancellor Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library uses for acquiring supplies to store archives and artifacts, because it is they still buffered acid-free stock. Also, the Northeast Document Conservation Center website, which is listed, also has a large amount of so-called preservation leaflets, which are available online for in order to assist with any specific needs regarding preserving large various archives and records and artifacts. Anyway, a good resource for any consultation when preserving or treating archives and artifacts is Northeast Document Conservation Center, which for a very long time has provided guidance on preserving artifacts and archives. They have several pages on their website for the proper storage and care for everything from photographs, archives, and collections items. Also for helping to clean any items that have been damaged through water, soot damage even. So and mold. So they're a very good resource to consult, especially if you have to deal with any potential large records, archives, or collections that may have been damaged by water, heat, mold, or soot, or many other factors. Okay, here we go. Professional organizations that I recommend that have a lot of good resources for determining how you can best care for and store your collections. One of the best is the American Association for State and Local History, which is specifically a organization run by a lot of lone rangers, people who are solely tasked with running the care and storage of archival collections and collections of artifacts, especially a lot of people who may be new to doing this type of work. So a lot of its resources are very tailored to helping people who have never processed archives before, processed collections. If you're a member, their website offers many webinars on archival basics, caring for collections, and other resources. Particularly with archives, the Society of American Archivists is the best professional organization in the United States as far as with archives. They have a lot of resources there. Museum collections or collections of artifacts. The American Alliance Museums is also a great resource. They have a lot of guides about the proper exhibition of collections, care of collections. Also, there is a organization specifically for Masonic libraries and museums called the Masonic Library Museum Association, which is primarily a small organization, but most of its membership is based in in North America. So it is made up of a lot of people, some of them who run Masonic libraries, museums, some of them run local museums in their own Masonic lodge. So it's a very good group of people, you know, to share ideas about storing and caring for archival collections, Masonic artifacts, and other matters. Generally, with our library, according to the Masonic law, we can only accession lodge records for closed lodges because active lodges are supposed to keep their lodge records. We do accept donations of Masonic artifacts provided that a deed of gift has been signed and the accession was approved by the director, me, and the curator. I've put my email of me and my curator there in case you want to donate anything to our library museum. And let's see, a library actually offers scanning services. We have a T's book drive scanner to scan bound objects, as well as a large Epson scanner for photograph scanning. We can do output everything from PDF, JPEG, TIFF, Word text document. Joseph Patzner, whose email is listed there, is the best person to contact for pricing and other information. And then last, I would like to share my own my email and email my curator in case anyone watching this presentation tonight wants to reach out to us. The staff of the Livingston Masonic Library Museum is more than willing to give advice to Masons who have to deal with the proper care and storage and processing of their Masonic records and artifacts. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Brother Ron Seifried.
Good evening, brothers. My name is Brother Ron Seifried, Worshipful Past Master of Jepta Lodge, number 494, here in beautiful Suffolk County, Huntington Township. I've been past master about 11 years now. I'm currently the chairman of the trustees and the lodge historian. As the curator of the Jepta Museum, we collect artifacts, but we're also archiving all our artifacts. We start from simple jewel display cases or little jewel items where we display in our glass cases throughout the lodge building, throughout the lodge room, to blueprint cabinets where we can store pictures, aprons, gavels, and Masonic certificates. One good example, when you handle your paper archives, is to get a lint-free archive gloves, which are relatively inexpensive in most archival locations or photo stores. This is a Masonic passport, dated probably the late 19th century. They came folded in a leather-bound booklet, easier for the brother to travel from one location to the other. When you open the document, it's folded, something's damaged. A little closer to everyone watching here, with the creases folded pretty deeply actually, and there can be some damage to the ribbons or the seals or even the writing on the certificates. What we do here at JPTA Lodge, and also what Grand Lodge does, is we actually put these archives into an archival sheet, a plastic sheet, as you see here, with a acid-free back. Eventually, we're actually label all these archives, and we place them in the archives for long-term research with either local historical societies, genealogy research, or local or brothers have joined the lodge. It's very imperative that archives are stored in a proper location or proper space in the lodge building. Many Blue Lodges I've attended or I've went through, they have in cardboard boxes. They have archives folded or crumpled up. Some actually left the sites, and that's an unfortunate situation. What we use is a blueprint cabinet. They're relatively inexpensive. You can find them at auctions, local antique shops. This is actually currently two cabinets. All several books, documents, gavels, many different documents, archives, and pictures, and also the Masonic aprons. The only problem with aprons, they get wrinkled. So, because they get crumpled up in their travel purses, and sometimes very often they're rolled up. That damages it. The threading will fall apart, the satin will fall apart, and they're not properly stored. And it's unfortunate a 100-year-old apron like this is damaged and eventually might have to be discarded because it's so moth-eaten or not well preserved. So what we do is we take all our past masters or right worshipful aprons out of the cases, and we place them here in the metallic case over here, metallic blueprint case. Next up, what you'll find in your large archives, you actually might find artifacts you actually had no idea are valuable to the lodge or to your local history. One good example, and I wasn't prepared for this, I apologize, I'm going off camera. During my research of JPTA Lodge 494, I discovered this old picture. Pretty nondescript. I'll try to get out of the lighting glare. It's taken at a church. It is of JPTA Brothers at a local church, taken about 1932. Unfortunately, nobody labeled this image. Unfortunately, nobody labeled the picture. So many of the older brothers, going to 80 years old, had no idea this picture came from. And unfortunately, I buried the image for many years here in our archives because we had no idea what it was. During research for my book, Long On Freemasons, I discovered that we actually had a very special guest at JPTA Lodge. He couldn't make it up here because of his limitations, his physical limitations to come up the 3-story building. And instead, the lodge rented out the local Presbyterian church. That brother was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And there he is standing here behind the pulpit. For many years, many older brothers had no idea FDR was a guest of JPTA Lodge. This piece of history actually was lost for decades, probably since the 1940s, after FDR's passing. Your lodge, your Blue Lodge, might have history that is relevant to not only local, but federal, national or state level interest. I've now been in contact with the FDR Library. We're actually trading information back and forth. We're looking for the actual speech he gave, which was on the adoption of the US Constitution. They are trying to track that down for us. They're very happy to receive a copy of this image. So by opening up the dialogue between yourself, the Blue Lodge, or your concordant body, and a local presidential library or a local historical society, that in itself will open a wealth of information of your lodge. You might be asking yourself, why we talk about a painting in an archival talk? Well, once again, this painting was unlabeled. This painting, nobody idea where this painting came from. I was curious. It is the building of King Solomon's Temple. It was hanging in one area of the lodge, but once again we buried it because we had no idea where it came from. And after a little research, I actually read the signature at the bottom, Gerald Tempest. So I looked online. Of course, I Googled it because we're very fortunate to have a technology out there. We can actually look at the information online now without leaving our homes. And I found that Gerald Tempest was a world-renowned surrealism, a painting of surrealist objects and paintings. I reached out to his son, and I showed him the image of this painting, and he confirmed for me that yes, this painting is by his father. And on top of that, Gerald Tempest was actually has 2 pieces of art in the Vatican Museum. He's a world-renowned painter. Once again, I'm still trying to figure out how this painting ended up in Jepta Lodge. We did track down its possible source, which was a period in the 1960s when he lived in North Carolina. And we're working with that lodge. We actually started talking to them before COVID to track down how this painting ended up in Jepta Lodge. It might have been sold at a garage sale. One brother moved up here in North Carolina. We're still trying to track that information down. Once again, I'm bringing this as an example to all the blue lodges out there, how you have no idea what's in your lodge museum, or actually your lodge closets, safes, attics. You might be sitting on a wealth of information that you are unaware of. Here's a common practice: an old cardboard box with Masonic artifacts. Not very safe to keep these artifacts in here. A copy of my book, CMS Plug, One on Freemasons. But we also have a gavel, an award, a book. No idea why it's here. Nobody labeled it. Many times during my research for Long On Freemasons, I've discovered that brothers, older brothers, not to cause damage to the lodge, but thought to be helpful to the lodge, they would take a box of artifacts off-site into their homes, a garage, or possibly their office, with a concept and idea to actually work on the lodge artifacts. The problem is when a brother takes the artifacts off-site and doesn't tell anybody about it, or he has the artifacts at his house for 5, 10 years, the lodge has no idea it's missing because only one person's keeping track of it, and the brother might pass away, God forbid. And when he does, the family looks at this box of artifacts, and what do they say? This is junk. They'll throw it out, or they'll put it in a garage sale without notifying the lodge. This has happened time and time again. And I urge all lodges who are watching, all historians and trustees, to keep track of your artifacts to make sure that they don't leave the location unless you have to do some high-res digital scanning. You can't bring the scanner to the lodge. That's understandable, but make sure the secretary or other trustees know that the artifacts are leaving for a very short period of time for your digitizing or archiving purposes. But don't keep it in your house. Don't keep the artifacts in your house because your house could burn down. Your house could flood, which has happened actually during Superstorm Sandy, where boxes were lost of Masonic artifacts from other lodges forever because they lived near the water. A flood came in, artifacts are lost, washed up to sea essentially. I want to show you that we have a relationship with a local town historian. This is Robert Hughes, the local town historian of Huntington. And our relationship has been growing very well in the last several years. Right now, our lodge volunteers 2 to 3 times a year to actually clean up the local old Burial Hill Cemetery, which dates back to the 1600s. This is through Robert Hughes, who's not a brother, excuse me. Through that relationship, we actually had events here where the town supervisor, or some of you might call the mayor, came here for a dedication ceremony, where we actually had our own historical marker, as you see, placed in front of our building a couple of years ago. That opens yourselves up to the community in terms of art, in terms of not only historical research, but potentially new brothers, and showing the community that you are a local, that you are an active lodge. I can't stress how your relationship with the town historian, and what I'm going to follow up with this is the Historical Society. For us, it's 2 separate entities, the historian and the Historical Society. Also, the historian places us on the pre-COVID, we had a pub crawl, historical pub crawl, where he would take groups of about 20 to 30 people to different historical locations, and he'd stop, have a beer or wine, and they would look at the or walk through and get a tour of the location. We have several locations like that in town, and our lodge has been on that tour for the last 3 years pre-COVID. And it's opened up once again yourselves to the community, and people come in and they're looking at the artifacts and they say, oh, my brother is Douglas Conklin, or my grandfather is Douglas Conklin, tell me more about him. And it shows interest in the archives that you have. If you have a museum or a location for a museum, with the Historical Society, I got much more information. I have a great relationship with the chief archivist over there, Karen Martin. And through her, I was able to scan 30 or 40 pictures from 100+ years ago of our building I've never seen. This one's a great example. This is a painting, which I was there dozens of times, and it took some figuring out that this painting actually is a past master of the Lodge from the 1880s, Dr. William Woodhand, who actually passed away at the inauguration of Benjamin Harrison, President Benjamin Harrison, just a coincidence. But this is a painting, it's an image of a brother, a past master of the Lodge that we did not have, we didn't have access to. So we of course scanned the image. We of course are now as part of our past master's wall. So that relationship with the Historical Society is very important. Not only that, we also, when I do my digital scanning of the high-res archives of the images and the minutes, those files, digital files, are handed over to the Historical Society as well. So they have their own database off-site. God forbid something happens to your lodge and you lose all those records. There's a backup off-site. Here's some images I was able to acquire from our local Historical Society. The building on the right is our lodge's first meeting location. This is dated in 1870. Once again, image we did not have, and only was acquired, based on our happenstance meeting with our local Historical Society. We also found images of inside the lodge room. Images we have no idea what's taking place. This turns out was a charity event by the Methodist Church in Cold Spring Harbor, wearing very funny pointy hats. It was a play. We have no idea what happened here. It was probably taken in 1920. Once again, that's our lodge room. We still have the furniture intact, but it's an image we had no idea existed until now. I'm still doing research on this organization. And of course, we get very odd images like this one. I have no idea what this image is. I'm gonna leave it up for a couple of minutes. It is, yes, you got it right, brothers, a collection of cross-dressing people giving a play in our lodge room. You can see the G in the background, the Knights Templar, and the different logos in the background. That is in the East. I have no idea if they're brothers. They're probably a traveling show, but once again, it was lost to our lodge. We never kept records like this, but I tracked it down to the Historical Society. But that's what I have today in terms of today's presentation. We will go over more details later on in terms of actually storing the archives, how you move them from one location to the other, how to prevent brothers from moving off-site. If they have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Brother Ron, actually, we have a lot of questions, a number of questions in the chat room, and I'm going to put them towards you. Brother Chris Caruso asks or says that they are planning to putting together a time capsule to be opened in 100 years from now. What advice? What are your thoughts? Can you offer to share with the brother?
We had two time capsules. One from our building, which was erected in 1904. And another one that we installed in 2004 at the centennial of the building. Our lodge goes back to 1859, but the building was purchased or actually erected in 1904. In the time capsule, I believe we had original newspaper articles of the time period, pennies, a Masonic certificate, a Masonic not a charter, but a communication. And probably a local, some local pictures as well was put in the archive in the time capsule. As for what they used for time capsule, I could tell you that in 1904 they used the original safe from 1860. They used that safe and they buried it in and built bricks, basically constructed bricks around it, mortar around that time capsule. I believe the combination was broken because who's going to keep the combination after 100 years? But it was placed in a very small safe, the original lodge safe.
Brother Ron, what would you suggest with respect to, and this is a question from Brother Joe Carruthers, with respect to storing and preserving old minute books?
It's a great question. Our minute books are currently we have a very large safe on the other side of the museum here. They are kept, it's an airtight safe. They've been there since the 1920s. Our books go back to 1859. They're in pristine condition. Brother Alex might have more detailed process how to store minute books for long term. But right now, I know from my experience for 100 years, I started scanning our first 10 years of minute books. They're in pristine condition, but Brother Alex might have a different idea in terms of what kind of plastic coverings or sealing items. But I do suggest before you store permanently or for long term your minute books, I do suggest scanning the books and use the feature that hopefully Nate Tweedie's segment will cover, which is an OCD, which actually will capture the text. Sorry, it's most likely on side, which will capture the text from the image and keep it in as a PDF file. So it's actually will be searchable. Instead of you have to go through scrolling through thousands and thousands of pages of documents, the special scanning software will actually pick up the text. And I believe Brother Nate will cover that in his segment, details on how to scan properly.
Brother Ron, Brother Tom Bittner from Franklin Lodge number 195 asked this question. What are your suggestions for storing common lodge items such as officers' jewels, Bibles, gavels, that you are still using, but because of their age, you want to just make sure that they're being stored and safeguarded when they're not actually in use?
If you're still using the gavels, which we do not use, we actually replace, our current warden gavels go back to the late 19-teens, so they are newer gavels essentially, but we're actually in the process of retiring our Bible after 60 years. As for the current gavels you're using, depends what condition they're in. I might suggest if they're fragile. I know some lodges have very fragile metallic gavels, some wood gavels. They only take out once a year for probably the installation or maybe a degree, but only once a year. They use a different gavel. These gavels are only taken out for special occasions on maybe an annual basis. If you had a very large box with a very cushion, layered cushions around the gavel, that's a good idea, and you keep it safe. If you don't have archives, in your regular lodge officer jewels closet.
Brother Ron, I know that Brother Nate may get into this a little bit more, but Brother Neil Selmer asks, what are your thoughts with respect to using just a cell phone, taking pictures of lodge minutes for storage?
I do that all the time. I do take pictures. I take pictures all the time out of the lodge because I find a document. I gotta look at this later. Let me take a picture now. I'll go home, do some more research, and then I'll come back. But I do prefer the high-res scans. Yes, a picture is fantastic, but I don't believe you can do. You can't capture the text with scanning software through a cell phone picture. If you're just doing a couple pictures, just for further research at the time without taking the archives off site, that's fine. Long term, I don't do that. I have a flatbed scanner, a Canon Scan 900F, which I use for my book. It's a workhorse, and I always capture high-res TIFF images. And if I share them on the web or with other brothers, I down-res copies into JPEG or possibly PDF. But I always capture high-res TIFFs because you never know what might happen to your archives. So that's why I have a whole server off-site with high-res images of the archives. But cell phone was fine temporarily, in my opinion.
How much does the machine that you just talked about, how much does that cost?
The scanner, well, a scanner can go for a flatbed scanner. You don't want to do a document fit scanner. A flatbed scanner can run from $150 and up. Some do actually come with a special scanning software that will capture the text. You will pay a couple $100 more for those. My scanner, I think, cost at the time maybe $400.
I was going to say that this may be something that whether if a lodge doesn't really want to spend out of their own, maybe even a district might purchase an item like this and can share it with their lodges. Just a thought to throw out there. I want to make a note that Brother Daryl Pickney has kindly put his information. He's a conservator, and he's indicated that it's at caretakershistory.net, and he's placed his phone number in the chat room for those who are interested. I'd like to let everyone know that all the information that Brother Alex presented earlier will also be available at craftsmanonline.com on our website once this video is uploaded. Brother Chuck Devo asks a basic question: what constitutes items, materials, objects, documents that should be considered as important to archive or store for posterity? What are your thoughts on that, Brother Ron?
It's really up to the lodge historian and large archivist. I think everything's important. I'm just a fool that way. I think every document is important. Every jewel is important. Every gavel is important. Nothing is garbage to me. Nothing is replaceable, in my opinion. I'll tell you a quick story. During my research for my book, I went to one lodge, shall be renamed, I will not name it. And it turns out a lodge officer threw out several boxes of lodge archives. This is a lodge elected officer, just threw them in the dumpster. Luckily, a neighbor called another brother, another past master, and he came in and fished the archives out of the dumpster. There's no reason. And that's a shame. So in my opinion, all the archives are important, and it should not be left to one brother. That's why the lodge trustees, depending on your lodge, you have 3, we have 5 trustees here at Jeff the Lodge. We don't make a move without the other 4 trustees knowing what's happening, what's off site. It's very important that we have transparency, not only with the trustees, because they are the caretakers of the furniture and of the archives, but they can also sign an historian or an archivist. It could be a trustee like myself, or it could be somebody else, and they're the judge of all the items. I've talked to past archivists or past masters here, and they look at the archives, just throw it out. And like this picture of FDR, which I put somewhere else now, but the picture of FDR, nobody knew what it was, and one brother actually said at one point, just throw it out. It's who's on there. They're all dead. Doesn't really matter. Until I figured out it was FDR. So you don't know until you do further research. And it takes an army of brothers to do the right thing, to preserve your archives for a long period. I suggest not throwing anything out. That's just me.
And I would like to just reiterate what Brother Ron said, and I wish Brother Dave Pitt made a similar comment, and that is, this is never up to one individual. Even the worshipful master who thinks that, it's his lodge, of course, and we understand and respect all the rules that and the powers of the worshipful master, but it's the lodge that controls. And so no single officer, including the worshipful master, has the right to destroy or throw something out. And it doesn't matter how old or how decorated that individual is, it's the lodge, and the lodge has to come together and work on these issues to ensure that you are preserving your history. I think it's time at this point to go to Brother Nate's video.
Good evening. Everything mentioned earlier having to do with preserving our lodge and its history and our items, all extremely important. And what I'm about to tell you isn't supposed to replace, but supplement. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about digitization of lodge items. Our minute books are a wealth of resources, and we need to make sure that we preserve them for posterity. However, many lodges will face some sort of catastrophic event to their property, be it a fire or a flood or a sprinkler system that malfunctions and drenches everything. All right, but these items are common enough that I guarantee off the top of your head you can think of at least one, if not more, lodges that have had a fire. In fact, in British Columbia, 3 different lodges, 3 different temples, I should say, Masonic temples or Masonic halls were burned this past week by an arsonist. Lodge I belong to, both my mother lodge had a fire back in the early 1900s. Luckily, all of our lodge items were safe. It only really impacted the lower levels of the building, and none of our items were lost. The lodge I affiliated with, that I'm currently the junior warden for, Delaware River Lodge. Well, when it was merging, 3 lodges were merging together. 2 of them had their documents and items together at Delhi and Delhi Lodge, and they had a fire. And luckily, I don't think we really lost much, mainly smoke damage to items, so some items are difficult to read. But when items get lost physically, we need to make sure we have a digital backup, because you never know when this is going to happen. So if you have a cell phone with a camera on it, chances are you have a good enough cell phone camera to just snap photos, right? Is that the ideal for preserving our lodge minute books and stuff? No, it's not. But does it work? Absolutely. And since it is really a question of when is this going to happen, it's really important that we have those items preserved digitally. Now, what do I use for preserving my lodge history? I'm going through Otsego Lodge right now, which is 225 years, and I use this. This is a scanner from the Caesar company, CZUR, and it's their Ultra Shine is the name of the scanner. It has a foot pedal, light, camera, all that. You can actually see the camera here, lights and camera. It does a really great job. It also has OCR, which is optical character recognition. So it actually can recognize letters, and once it's in a PDF form, you can actually scan for specific words, which is fantastic if you're trying to find a specific item in the history of your lodge. But also what happens with this, you scan, it creates a JPEG or a PDF. It has a foot pedal, so you can just tap that and scan. Even if you lay the book out, the minute book out, it'll flatten out the pages. So that's a nice smooth scan. Really, this is a fantastic piece of equipment for under $200. I strongly encourage you to invest in something like this. I'm not saying you have to buy from Caesar itself, but there are plenty of items out there with OCR technology and quick scan. But yeah, this one, for the price, you can't really beat it. And they claim you can scan a 300-page book in about 10 minutes. Obviously, we don't want to go that fast with our minute books, especially if they're older, but you could if you wanted to. Also, once you scan it, you have to do something with it, right? So having storage offsite is very important. There's two ways you can do this. I recommend doing both. Using an external hard drive is great for plug it in, get it, all the information just right onto that hard drive, and then you can take it wherever you need to. I keep mine at home for my lodge, but if you have multiple people who have hard drives with the exact same information, even better. Another option is to have it stored in the cloud via a cloud storage service. There's plenty of them available. Apple, Google, tons of the big players in the tech world all have their cloud storage. I guarantee you someone in your lodge can figure out how to do that if you don't. But storage of your documents is arguably the most important part, because what's the point of storing it all if you leave it right there in the building? You should probably have a copy in your building that you can quickly access, be it on the hard drive of the laptop scanned, or if it's on an external hard drive in your building. But you have to make sure that it's somewhere else, because what's the point in having it all backed up if a catastrophic event happens to your building and you lose it all? Also, it's worth noting that while there isn't really a call for it, feel free to reach out once you have things digitized. Reach out to the Grand Historian, reach out to your area historian, reach out to Grand Lodge, see if they are interested in having your minutes or any other documents that you have digitized. There are records for each lodge, and adding to those is not necessarily a bad thing. But the key right now, it really is just make sure you get them done. Take those pictures with a cell phone, get some basic form done, just in case the worst should happen tomorrow. And then if you have the time and the money, by all means, invest in something like this that's a little more robust and can really bring an extra layer of added value to your digitization projects. Again, thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, be glad to answer those for you.
My brothers, I see one last question that's in the chat box from worshipful brother Neil Selmer, who asks, he's received a lot of items from the Grand Lodge material. Should they all be safeguarded or stored? It's not so much as the historian, but rather from the perspective of the requirements, legal and Masonic requirements. If Grand Lodge has sent you an item, most likely you were required to read it, affix it to your lodge books, to your minutes. If it was not required in that manner, there's not necessarily a requirement to safeguard those items. Then again, if you have something of that's an old document that does in fact reflect some historical import, then common sense would dictate that we want to save that. But I'm assuming that I know that lodges receive, volumes of paper from the Grand Secretary's office and from Grand Lodge, and it's not an obligation to maintain every single item. Once again, if it was required to be read in open lodge and placed in on the minutes, then of course that's part of your lodge minutes. Brother Ron, would you like to comment about that at all?
Well, all the Grand Lodge communications should be kept with the minutes. You can make scans of that, of course. But in terms of storage of anything from Grand Lodge for the Grand Lodge archives, that should be directed to Brother Alex. For Blue Lodges, all the Grand Lodge communications should be kept. We have communications going back with Grand Lodge here, going back to the 1860s. So we preserved all the artifacts here from them, from Grand Lodge.
So Brother Neil, that's the answer, at least from Brother Ron's perspective, that every single piece of document that comes in, they're maintaining those items and just storing them and safeguarding them. Is that correct, Brother Ron?
Correct.
Okay. My brothers, I want to thank you. The hour is approximately 8:35, and I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank, of course, Brother Alex for his presentation at the beginning of this program. I want to thank, in fact, Right Worship Brother Stephen King, the president of the Robert R. Livingston Masonic Library, and the entire board for all the work that they do, for also allowing Brother Alex to attend. I see Worship Brother Right Worship Brother William Marr, who's with us as well, another board member who does wonderful, wonderful work. In fact, I had the pleasure of meeting Brother Bill years and years ago, and one of the most special times was actually when we visited the Statue of Liberty, when he was a ranger over there, and we had a rededication at the base of the Statue of Liberty, which was a memory that I will certainly hold dear. Brother Ron, you are invaluable. Your lodge is so fortunate to have you. The Grand Lodge of New York is so fortunate to have you. Us brothers at Craftsmen Online are so fortunate to have you. I'm so fortunate to have this wonderful book called Long Island Freemasons. Purchase at your local Amazon, local bookstore, or
Also
Amazon.
Kindle and Nook.
Kindle or Nook. But don't get it at a library. Get it, buy it.
No.
Once again, my brothers, thank you so much. You know, we have so many wonderful presentations and programs that are coming up. Please go to Craftsmen Online. If you provide your email address, you'll get notifications. We've started some wonderful programs called the Reading Room, where brothers will get open source material, a small chapter, and then join with brothers around the state, the country, and quite frankly, the world, and discuss some interesting Masonic topics. We have an interesting program called the Lodge of Discussion that's coming up. What we're trying to do is just educate and bring these types of events out to the brethren so that you can possibly bring it back to your own lodge once, God willing, we're all able to meet without masks. With that, my brothers, be safe, be well. Brother Ron, I owe you dinner. Brother Ron missed his past master's meeting. Thank you very much, my brothers. Be well. God bless you all.